Git, and then on top of it, we have Drupal running. So our DevOps engineer Dave take care of introducing us since a lot of years ago started using Docker. Sorry, a couple of years ago started using Docker. Docker's been amazing because actually it creates a new layer on top of our operating system where we can actually run a new web stack on an independent container that doesn't interfere with the rest of the computer. So the good thing is that we can just have a running web stack with Drupal on top of it that can be easily reproduced across our computer and actually clone in any of the other workstations. So we managed to have the exact same environment all across them. So
even if the computers, even if the dev environments themselves are different, if I'm on a Mac and someone else is on Linux, it doesn't matter. Inside the containers, everything is the same.
No. And if somehow we mess it up or we need to start again, we just destroy the containers and start doing it again. It's not a big problem. Okay. Instead of having to reinstall a web server in our computer, we just need to relaunch it again. So each container was built on top of a vagrant layer because at the moment we started doing so, Docker for Mac wasn't ready yet. So we have this Unix layer running. Then on top of it, we're running actually Docker, and then our web stack, and then on top of it, our Drupal A website. So the good thing about this is that it was distributed across all computers of our developers, either the content management, the themer, the site builder, and anyone can have this exact same clone of the website anywhere behaving exactly the same. So the good thing about this approach is that it solves the works on my computer excuse, or I don't know why it's not working here. So overall, we already have the dev environment set, and the site building components defined. So do you remember this slide when I said that we can track every single change and we can reproduce actually the empty website? Okay, but now how do we actually manage the website but not empty? We need the content to be there to run an actual migration. So there's where we jump into the content flow strategy. So as I mentioned before, our D7 website has a few elements that we wanted to keep and migrating to the new website, like they mentioned before, like a content type like trainings, tags, and blog posts that we had for years and that were giving us a lot of traffic from the web. We had a set of features like functionalities that we also wanted to keep. We also have users that were related to blog posts, and tags were also related to blog posts. We wanted to maintain all these mesh of relationships into our new website. And we had the problem that we also had new content every week. We were going to be building the new website for a couple of months, so we couldn't do a content-free stage. We wanted to continue to be publishing content at the same time that we were building a new website. So how do we actually manage all of that at the same time? Now, on the new website, on the other hand, we also wanted to improve a few things. Like we wanted to have a new menu hierarchy and improve our content presentation and the hierarchy itself. We also wanted to add new content that wasn't on the old one. We also wanted to improve content types with data actually that we had in the previous website, like adding new fields for defining where the training is going to be, where the training is going to be, what's the level of the training, and things like that. We wanted to create a new marketing blocks for defining new landing pages and improving our business presentation. We wanted also to provide a fully multilingual support because we're located in Quebec and we have to be French and English at the same time. And we also wanted, of course, to make our website responsive. So when we put all these things together, we have our existing content, the user base, we have the new content that we wanted to add, and we had new features that we wanted to implement in the new website. So the big question, how do we actually manage that our existing website is going to continue receiving new content, and at the same time our content managers were going to be writing the content for the future new websites that it's not steady yet. I mean, it's not like a free state that we have all the content today. It's going to be also a continuous process that was going to be edited and updated during the development phase. So how do we actually manage those things? Two things, plus the fact, sorry, that we have new features. So, first of all, we jump into our actual development workflow. Thanks, Dave. I'm sorry. I'm gonna need more.
It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Save some for me.
Okay. Oh, so how do we actually manage all these changes on our content, not on our structure, but on our content on the same place? First option. Do we handle a single database? We all know that's a big problem. Even taking into account that Drupal also stores structure in the database itself. So we went to the
What goes wrong with you?
Anyway, I'm 2 slides away of giving the presentation today.
Yeah, we can take over.
Yeah, I'm gonna handle it today. Sorry.
That's okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right. So if you have just a single database, as we were saying before, a lot of things go wrong because somebody will work on, like for when you're changing configuration, it's not so bad because it will go into config management, it'll become YAML files and you can diff those using Git tools and such and merge them. But content, you can't really merge that way. So if you share a database, somebody will add a node here and somebody else will add a node there and they'll try to both like synchronize their databases up to our staging environment and everything will go wrong. You know, they'll overwrite each other's stuff. So that's really not a great approach most of the time. So, and the other approach that we thought of is like we can just have everybody use their own database and somehow find a way for this to work, everybody working on their own. But then the problem is that things are changing all the time and every time somebody changes something, like they have to have a way to sync it to so that it's there for everybody. So we can't have a single site, a single staging site that everybody's working on at the same time because they'll stomp on each other. And we can't have just separate databases. So we needed a new solution and we decided to do this using migrations. And so the approach with migrations is that we're going to say, forget about like synchronizing databases all the time. Instead, everybody, like Jorge said before, everybody can just bring up an empty site. We already know how to do that in a reproducible way. And then once we've done that, let's just pull all the data into that from different sources instead of trying to share a database. So on our old site, we had these things that we want to bring in. And remember, this is being updated all the time. And there's lots of things that we don't want to bring in, actually, like the theme and the blocks. And we had panels on that site, which we just didn't want to use anymore. We had all kinds of things outside we didn't want to bring. And we decided these are the things that are important. These are the important bits of content. Other things, we can rebuild them. And so we can take we can build all this new content and all this new blocks. And the way we built this, because if we're not going to build it on the old site and we're not going to share a database, where are we going to put this? So we had a new staging environment that we built just for creating content. It was basically just an empty Drupal 8 site where we set up content types that were kind of what we needed. And it didn't matter if we got the structure wrong a little this way. Like, for example, we decided at one point that the cities should just be for each training, we would have a drop-down list and just be a text list widget. And then later on we decided, you know, those should really be a taxonomy. And so it doesn't matter, we could just change that later. And so we take both of these and we pull them into the D8 site. And so from the original D7 site on the left, we can export a database and we can pull that into the new D8 site. And from the content staging environment, we can export everything in there as JSON using the new REST module in Drupal 8, and then just pull it in from there into the new D8 site. And so all our data just comes from external sources, and there's no data that's part of this project directly. And so we did this by grouping our migrations. So we had a group called D7, which pulled the old content, and we had a group called staging, which pulled the new content. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about why we need this content staging environment, because it sounds like a lot of work to set up a whole extra site, even if it's kind of an empty Drupal site, just to create your new content. Like, it's true that there's a lot of conflicts that you can have when you're sharing a database, but it still seems like a lot of work. So one of the big reasons was because this site was new, and we were new to D8 too. And so we didn't know how our information architecture would change. Like the example I just said before, we could take something that used to be a list and turn it into a taxonomy. We could take things that used to be vocabularies and turn them into nodes. And there are all these things you might decide to change. Running, if you do that on a live site or while you're all sharing a site and building it together, it's really complicated. You have to run update hooks and tell everybody don't touch the site for a while. And if your hook breaks things, you have to restore from backups. This way, the migrations could just handle all the changes. A migration could say, I'm going to take data from a taxonomy term and turn it into a node, and that's not a problem. The other issue is that when you're building a site and it's a new site, you make all these decisions, then you change your mind about them, and you end up with all this cruft in the database, old content types that nobody's using, views that you've destroyed, but maybe they're still used somewhere, who knows. This way, we make sure that the site is a clean database. Everything in there is exactly what we want. Any mess that happens with content, we can clean up somewhere else. And finally, this means that even when we weren't sure what the site was going to look like exactly, we could have the client, in this case us, but our content people, work on the content at the same time as we were setting up the site. And again, we didn't have to be 100% sure how it would look. We could fix everything in migrations. And we could do this all the time. Our new site could just continue to be rebuilt every time we need it. You just destroy it and rebuild it while it's in development. And it doesn't affect whether the content, what's happening with the content. It doesn't destroy content, because the content is all coming from either the old site, which is still up and stays up all the time, or this content staging site, which is still up and stays up all the time. So every time anything happens, we can just rebuild the container and run the migrations, and we're fine. So let's talk about these migrations a little more. We just run them normally using drush. In this case, we say drush migrate import and the D7 group, and that pulls in all the content from the old site. It pulls in all the content that we want. It pulls in this case, the users, the tags, and the blog posts. And it keeps the relationships between them intact, because you can do that very easily in migrations now. One thing that we did that's kind of interesting here, that doesn't come with migrating, we had to do custom, was we pulled in the files, but only the files that were related to blog posts. So every time a blog post got pulled in, the associated files got pulled in. But all the several tens of gigabytes of other random files that we had sitting around on that site, we could just leave off to the side and not include them in our new site, because we want to get rid of all the junk. I wrote a blog post about how to do that, which you can read on the Evolving Web blog. And then from the content staging environment, again, just run the migrations, and it pulls all this new stuff in. It pulls in the blocks, it pulls in the new nodes, so for the team member descriptions, so you know who Jorge is and you know who I am. It pulls in the new trainings that we created. It pulls in even the menus. We had to do a little bit of custom work on that too. And it pulls in the redirects, just any other information that the site would need that doesn't live on the old site, we could all take from the staging site. One nice thing is that we could also do incremental migrations, at least for small changes. So if we went and created a few new nodes, we could just run a migration on, let's say, the staging site. We could run the migrations again, and they would get pulled in. And so this was really useful for keeping things up to date when we'd make small changes. It didn't work as well with big changes. If you delete nodes on, let's say, the content staging site, and you try to update, like run the migrations again, that they won't get deleted automatically. So that was a small problem that you should consider if you try this strategy. So D8 Migrate is still an experimental module, and there's lots of things that weren't perfect and we had to do ourselves. Multilingual migrations was a big one. Of course, as Jorge mentioned, we're in Quebec. We had a multilingual D7 site, now we have a multilingual D8 site. And so we had to figure out how to get multilingual content across our migrations, and that was not in core yet. But now it is, because of the work that we did. We had to get our menu links to come across, and that's difficult because menu links come in a hierarchy, right? You don't just have a list of menu links, but some of them live under other menu items. So we had to do a little bit of work on that, specifically on exporting them, because you can't make a view over menu links. So we had to come up with a way to do that. Paths and redirects was a big issue because our old site just used numeric node IDs for a lot of pages, and our new site used paths, which are much preferable for SEO reasons. But we had to make sure that some places where we had old paths on the old site would continue to point to the same place, because otherwise it's going to really, hit your Google PageRank. As I mentioned, we did our thing with referenced files, only pulling in files that came from certain blog posts. One thing that was important is that our content staging site, of course, it had to be a shared site hosted on our servers somewhere so that multiple content people could work on it at the same time. And that was great, except we didn't want other people to find our content staging site and know everything that we were doing. So we protected it with HTTP authentication. It's basically a password authentication, the basic kind that you can use. And then our migrations had to support that. Our migrations had to know how to log into that site, essentially. And so we added some support for that. It's not very hard to do. I should probably write a blog post about that too. And finally, the UI translations were a big problem. There's translations that are in core and for contrib modules, and those are easy to pull across different sites because you all get them from the same place, from localize.drupal.org. There's translations that are in content, and those just live in content, so they're pulled across pretty easily once we did our multilingual work before. But our custom user interface translations, it's really annoying to get those across. You have to be able to export them as a profile and then import them on the new site. And that was a problem which we would probably try to find a better way to do next time. Okay, so we did all this custom work. We built our migrations. We pulled everything from the old site. We pulled everything from the new site. And now we have to see, is it working? Did it do what we want? We have to test what we did. And so we have this tool that we wrote called Site Diff. I presented on it at DrupalCon Los Angeles, so you could see my presentation there if you want to hear everything about it. But the basic version of what it does is that it checks one site against another site and does a bunch of transformations to get rid of the parts you don't care about. So when we transferred our blog post from the old site to the new site, we wanted to make sure that every bit of content was basically the same. We didn't care about were the menus the same, right? Because those changed. We changed the structure of our site. We don't care if the blocks are in the same place. We just want to know about the content. So we could write a configuration for Site Diff that looks at our site on the old site and strips everything except the content, and looks at the new site and strips everything except the content, and makes sure that they're the same. And it produces a report that looks something like this that says, this is a simple example, it says, here are some pages that have changed. You should probably look into those and make sure the changes are what you expected. And then for each of those pages, you can look at a diff and say, these are the specific lines that changed. Is that what you wanted? And then for each of these changes, we could go and check, is this the change that we want or is this a change that we don't want? And this lets us triage our new site and make sure that, especially that there's no links missing. Oh, yeah, I forgot about this part. It even lets us do a visual comparison. So in this case, we could see, oh, that's the actual difference that we saw between those two pages. So using Site Diff, we're able to check, is the new site really what we want it to be, at least as far as the blog posts that were on the old site? And also, especially, does it have all the same links? Are there any links that existed on the old site that don't on the new site? Because if that happens, that'll kill your SEO, and you have to be really careful about it. Okay, so once we did all these steps, we built our new modules and chose our theme and chose new contrib modules to replace the old ones. We created a development environment. We built this whole set of migrations to pull content from different places onto our new site. And then finally, we tested everything. Then we just had to create we built tests rather. Then we just had to create all our content and create the whole site structure once we did this and make sure it all comes together. And and at that point, once we were done, we could just do a build, in our Docker system and pull up a brand new site where the migrations would run and everything would be pulled into it and it would be identical on everybody's machine. Any bug that we had in production, we could reproduce exactly in development, and it was great. And so the results of this are that we have this new site. It looks great. It looked exactly like it was supposed to look in the design. We have this Docker approach so that everybody can have the exact same development environment. It's exactly the same as what's in prod, and people don't interfere with each other. Nobody stomps on somebody else's work. We have this content staging approach where content is being pulled from both sides into our new site, and it's combined. So you can see in this case that we had the content, that's our content staging site, just a plain Drupal site. So we're having some content from there and some content from the old site, and they're just merged together into the new site. And we have all the pages that we plan to have in our design, and they're all basically like how they were planned to be. So we've helped a bunch of other organizations since then. This was our first Drupal 8 project, but since we did that, we started helping other organizations to move to Drupal 8. So you see here we did a project for a group called Carthagène, a research group in Montreal, and another one for the Council for Responsible Nutrition in the States. Moving content and in D8 and doing D8 site building too. And that's our talk. Thank you very much. I think we have time for questions. Actually, we have plenty of time for questions, don't we?
Yeah. Questions?
Are there any questions? Yeah.
So you mentioned the config, theme, module, everything is code repository, but content is not that, right?
I'm sorry?
The content is not actually in code repository, right?
No, so the content is not on our core repository. The content lived on our old site and on this temporary content staging site that we used to build the content. And then eventually it was merged into the new site, and once we went live with the new site, then we just had the new site's database, and we're using the database to a shared database approach from now on.
I was just wondering, have you tried a default content module in Drupal 8?
I'm sorry?
Default content in Drupal 8
Default
module?
content?
Yeah.
No, is that one of the ones that does sample content, or?
That exports and imports content.
Oh, it exports and imports content.
With
Okay, that's
non-based
cool.
content.
It's called default content?
That's right.
Okay, I'll take a look at it, thanks. Yeah?
So when you were talking about the difference between those two sites, the old site and the new site, it sounded like you had bits of duplication, like, you know, it would be blog post A, which is, you know, about this one subject. What different things were you adding in the staging site that eventually had to be merged? It sounded like you would have the same core content, and then there would be little bits added in.
I don't know, I'm sorry, maybe. So it wasn't, every type of things lived on one or the other. So the blog posts only came from the new site, from the old site. There were no blog posts on the content staging site because usually when we write a blog post, we just want to be able to publish it soon, right? We didn't want to have to wait for the new site to go live before we publish blog posts. But things that existed on the content staging site were, for example, custom blocks, the menu structure, certain content types, such as the trainings. We only had, 20 current trainings on the old site that were currently in use. So it was much easier to just recreate those and be able to fix up bugs in the content type. Basically anything that was either brand new or was small enough to be worth reproducing, we would do on the new site. The only thing we pulled from the old site was, we had hundreds of blog posts. We're not going to copy and paste those all. And same with the tags. And then the users, we just wanted to keep the associations together, which we couldn't do in any other way. Otherwise, we probably would have kept the users, redone the users also. But everything else lived on the new site. Do you have other examples of what was on the?
Yeah, even tags for browsing. We had something like landing pages for tags. The default taxonomy section that you click, let's say CSS.
That didn't live on the content staging.
No, that wasn't the D7 site. So that's something we wanted to keep. That relationship, we also wanted to keep it.
And other stuff that was new on the
staging. It was blocks, even blocks positioning in the theme. No, that was configuration.
No, that was config. I can go back to the slide for that. Actually, we have a whole list. If you look at the output here, so you can see, right? We had a taxonomy for the levels of trainings as a beginner, intermediate, advanced. That was even moved. We had menus, we had trainings and courses, which are different on our site. Projects for our new portfolio. We wanted to redo all of that. So there's a whole lot of stuff that was on the new site. It was mostly new. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, I think I was understood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. More questions? Yeah, hi.
So you can talk a bit about How much time it took you to kind of like do the entire process?
This took us a long time because we were new to Drupal 8, and we decided the best way to learn is to do it on our corporate site, where we're not under the same kind of time constraints that we'd be under otherwise. We think that now that we know how to do it, we've been much faster on other projects we've done since then. So yeah, we think everybody should get started on Drupal 8 quickly, because otherwise you're going to have your lunch eaten by companies that have already tried it.
Yeah, overall, this project took us like 5 months, not
Yeah.
full time.
That was including the design, which had to get done, and building all the new content, which had to get done.
But similar project and even a little bit bigger. Maybe for us it's now 2.5, 3,
Yeah.
something like that.
Sounds
Of course,
about
it depends on the amount of content and structures you want to reproduce.
right. Yeah.
Is your Docker integration new to your Drupal 8 site, or did that already exist with 7?
We already had it in 7. It just works better with 8, because in 7 you'd be using features, and features is great, but it's not as good for just bringing up a site from scratch. We had some different things that we did to try to work around that, to pull all our modules together. Some people use drush make scripts and things like that. We had another solution. It was okay, but we find it works much better with D8 because you can just do a single config import. And it worked. Actually, we use this tool called Config Installer. I don't know if you've used it. It basically lets you say, this is a brand new site. I don't even have to start with a database. Just give me a bunch of config and I'm going to set up the site. And so we just use that inside of Docker, and it works much better. We think that even if you're on D7, you should try using something like Docker or Drupal VM if you're not accustomed to setting these things up. But it works even better with D8. Yeah.
Okay, so sounds like you have like several different people work on the same time
That's right.
for this project, like content staging,
Mhm.
and then you guys build the new Drupal 8 site, and that content staging is also Drupal 8.
That's right.
So you move the old, like all those old website contents to the new content staging, and
No, not quite. We moved the old stuff. The old stuff stays where it is. The content staging is only the new stuff.
only new stuff.
And then we merge them together onto our new site.
And the new site is like you at the same time you're the guys doing all those themings, the new look,
Yeah, that's right.
and the Drupal 8. And do you guys do all those? Or are you guys using contribute modules or custom modules?
Both.
Yeah, mostly contrib modules. We only have, I think, 2 custom modules.
And we're mostly for migrations, I think.
Yeah, they were mostly for migrations and to fix bugs because we were doing this on Drupal 8.0, which still had a lot of things that needed fixing. It's gotten much better.
I'm sorry. When you use those contribute modules, do you find like are they stable? Like because they are still, I know a lot of them still not there yet. It's still, most of them are still 7. There's not too much like 8 yet.
We make a big effort at Evolving Web to consider very carefully which contrib modules we use and only use the ones that seem stable and well maintained and well written. I think Ted Bowman's giving a talk on that today. It might be at the same time as this. So, but in general, just because there's a module for something, it doesn't mean you should use it. It's sometimes even better to just like take a feature out rather than use a bad module for it. Maybe a module that isn't maintained quite as well as I would like. And so we were pretty careful about that. We only chose modules like contact storage that were well tested.
Yeah.
The theme Bootstrap was pretty well tested.
Yeah.
We still found bugs, but just because Drupal 8 was so new. It's a lot better now. Things are better ported now. But yeah, we were very careful to not include things unless we either knew we could do it ourselves or there was a good module to do that existed in Drupal 8.
So you started running in Drupal 8 right now?
Yeah, it's all Drupal 8.
Do you feel like it's more, like much more faster, much more easier?
It's not faster. It's but it's definitely easier. The built-in CK editor, the CWig editor, is great. We really like that. The multilingual support is better, which we appreciate a lot. It just looks nicer because we had time to redo the theme, which is good. I don't know, is there anything that we're not happy with about the new site?
Besides speed?
Yeah, Drupal 8 is slower, and it's just the thing you have to deal with. It's fine for anonymous visitors because everything is cached, but when you're editing a lot of nodes, like the caches keep getting cleared, and that's pretty annoying when you're in admin. It's just something in Drupal 8 which you have to get used to. Oh, thanks. Any more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify the migration setup, so you have the actual site, you have an empty site that you move the content that you want to migrate, and then you have your staging.
Yeah, so here, this is, so we have the old site in D7, that one's pretty clear. We have our content staging site up there in the upper right, and that's just a plain Drupal 8 site. I think that we have a better slide for that. Let me find it. Yeah, here. So there, you see, like that's an example of what's in our content staging environment over there on the right. It's just like no theme, nothing special about that site.
You're not doing any sort of change of taxonomy or changing things to different places in staging.
No, I mean, sometimes we'll change things. Like sometimes we'll say, oh, it turns out we want to add a field, and then we'll just adjust our migrations to deal with it. But we won't.
But that happens in your site.
In the new one, yeah.
Not in the staging.
The staging. Well, we'll add a field to staging, and we'll also add maybe a different field to the new one. We'll have migrations adjust things as necessary. Whoops! Did I just? Yeah. So that's kind of the approach. I don't know if that's
And
clear.
the migration scripts that you're writing will take whatever's coming out of the old site and put them in that new field.
Yeah, that's right.
I got you.
And they're not like migration scripts per se. We're using migrate, which is a core module, part of Drupal 8 now, and it's already the intended path for upgrade. So even though this made our upgrade a little more complicated than it could be potentially, you already sort of have to do a lot of this when you do an upgrade. Are there any more questions? Hi.
Have you guys done upgrade from Drupal 6 to Drupal 8?
We haven't done one directly, but I've been working a lot on migrating core. So I've played a lot with doing it on smaller sites. We definitely, I think, if you have multilingual content in D6 especially, I think we're the only ones who have any experience doing that. Unfortunately, it's really something we need to get done. But yeah, we look forward to doing more projects like that because we think we've got a lot of experience using migrating.
So do you think the same process would work with Drupal 6 to Drupal 8?
Yeah, it might be even better in a Drupal 6 site because there's just so much more that you'd want to throw away.
Right.
Like you like your content, but there's a lot of, not because things in Drupal 6 were terrible, but just there are modules that were the hot new thing in Drupal 6 that just don't exist anymore and have replacements now. And so you'd really need to migrate things across.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.